Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my tutorial on how to make ambient music. I'm breaking down my latest single, Cycles. If you want to listen to it, the link is down in the description. Make sure you watch part 1 first. Click here or down in the description to watch the video first, or this is not going to make any sense to you. Let's get right into it. So first, we're going to look at the build-up to the main big section at the end. So this is the build-up. And I really love that sound. The build-up itself sounds like this. And I didn't use any risers. I actually made all of those sounds myself. So the first one sounds like this without any processing. It's just a little bell sound, and I have it in reverse, and now it sounds like this. Pretty cool. So the second one is also a bell, but it's more like a traditional, like bigger bell. You get the idea. How I did that sound, again, I don't have any plugins here, but I did it in a different session. I took the sample, I reversed it, added reverb. So the sample was in reverse and it had reverb. And then I reversed it again, so the sample was the right way, but the reverb was in reverse. So you have this big tail of reverb coming in, and then you have the sound. The reverb is building up to the sample. Reverb, and then the normal sample. It's a pretty cool sound. Then I have another piano note like before, with tons of distortion and reverb. I have another piano note and a cymbal. So I want to show you what it would sound like without those risers that I made. It sounds very sudden. It doesn't build up to that moment. It just comes out of nowhere. So, guitars. So I'm using the Plini plugin again for absolutely everything. So first I have two rhythm guitars. They are hard panned, right side and left side. And I'm using the same amp. I'm using the overdrive amp, but this time I'm using more gain. You can see my settings. It's different. It has more distortion. I have the overdrive pedal engaged, and I'm not using delay this time. And I'm getting rid of all the low end. Yeah, that's what my Ibanez sounds without the amp. And I have two lead guitars. I have three lead guitars. So right side and left side. And this one is in the middle, playing one octave below the other two. Now we have the bass. That's my bass without any plugins. So I use the BOD Bass Overdrive by TSE Audio. It's free, it sounds really good, and it's like an emulation of a Sans amp pedal. It's the Sans amp is a preamplifier for bass, That sounds really good. Then compression, lots of it. I'm getting more than 7 dB of gain reduction. Then I'm adding saturation to the sound. I feel like it gives it a lot more presence. It sounds a little brighter. It has more harmonics on top, so it cuts through the mix a little better. And then I'm adding even more high end, and I'm getting rid of those nasty middle boxy frequencies. Yeah, that's a very simple way to get a very decent bass sound. So the drums, I actually don't have the plugin in this instance anymore because Reaper was not running the session very well. It wasn't running it at all. And the heaviest plugin that I was using was Get Good Drums, Modern and Massive. So I just have a single stereo track of what that sounded like. So I don't have anything to show you, but I wasn't really doing anything fancy with it. It was just Get Good Drums, Modern and Massive with the default like big sound preset. I just didn't do anything to it. It sounds really good. So the basic rock ensemble, drums, guitar, and bass sounds like this. But I think that sounds a little bit empty. So now I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna show you everything else that I'm using on top of that. So first I have the sub bass actually. It's super low. Again, you're not gonna be able to hear anything if you're not wearing headphones, but that's the sub bass filling up those lower frequencies. And I have strings somewhere. Here they are. So it's just intimate strings again, but this time it's the long articulation. And I have some compression and some EQ. I'm getting rid of some weird frequency that I didn't like. And everything put together sounds like this. Now I'm gonna talk about the mixing part. It was kind of difficult to mix this thing, mainly because I had two kind of different genres inside the same thing. It was the same session. The first problem that I encountered was the master compression. I was trying to compress the first section, but I had to set the threshold too low. And when the big loud part at the end came in, it was too compressed. And if I compressed to those levels, it wasn't really catching the lower part. So I'm using two different compressors here. And here you can see how one of them is turning on at the end and the other one is turning off. I'm automating the bypass in those two compressors. And here you can see them. This one is on. You can see how one is turning off and the other one is turning on. So the first one is the one for the main ambient part. I'm using this much makeup. It's only 4.7 dB. And then for the loud part, I'm using only 1.5 dB of makeup gain and less threshold as well. So I'm using individual compressors for each section because those are so different. So one is turning off and then the other one kicks in. And that helps me keep the whole thing a little bit more leveled. I know that might be a bit more of a mastering thing, but it was something that really saved my butt when I was mixing this whole thing. So for the guitar, you can see here that it has some weird red lines, if I can get the zoom right. I did hundreds of takes to get the guitar just perfect. So some were a little different. I did some in different days. So the gain was a little bit different on my interface. So I had to turn down some takes more than others, and I had to leave some like they were. Maybe some of them are boosted. I don't know, but I had to go in manually and adjust the level of the takes so they are all at similar volume. And then after that, I have the volume of the guitar automated as well. So here you can see that the volume starts at -8 and then it goes up -7. And that's because the mix kept getting bigger. And so I would adjust the volume at the beginning, and then as I added more layers and synths and strings and more samples, the guitar started to get buried in the mix and you couldn't hear it anymore. So each time I was adding something, I was bumping the volume of the guitar just a little bit so it could keep up with the rest of the sounds. So those are the two main tricks I had to come up with to save the mix, really. Everything else that has to do with mixing, I kind of already touched upon when I was talking about the individual tracks. But if we look at the session, for example, here I'm sending the piano to a parallel compression because the piano is a very dynamic instrument and I was playing it very dynamically. So there are very soft parts and then it gets a little louder, and I wanted to keep those dynamics, but those dynamics are hard to mix as well. So I'm sending the piano to a compressor. So you can see that I'm kind of squashing the sound. That's only the compressed signal. It is very heavily compressed, but that parallel processing allows you to have the main dynamic sound and also this compressed sound that makes a little lower, but it gives it that presence that helps it being heard throughout the entire mix. And that's the only parallel processing that I made. I can talk about parallel processing and parallel compression specifically on a different video. And I'm sending the strings to the massive reverb just a little bit because I wanted it to sound like the guitar and the strings are in the same space. So you can see that the strings are coming out of the reverb track a little bit. That's the reverb by itself. It's mainly guitar. But the strings are there a little bit. And that big reverb sound underneath the whole thing is what gives it that ambient sound. So before the master compressions that I already talked about, I have an EQ and I'm just making the overall mix a little brighter. I'm adding 5.3 dB of everything above 6K. It's just adding a little bit more brightness. If I take it off, you can tell that it's a little bit too dark. And I like my mixes pretty bright. And I'm using Ozone 9 elements. I'm using the imager a little bit and the maximizer to give it the proper volume. I'm not gonna turn it on because I'm gonna blow my ears off and yours. Span and G-Clip, I always use them just for referencing and just to be able to look at what I'm hearing. And And that's it. That's how I made cycles. I know there's a lot of information here, so if you want a more in-depth tutorial on any of the topics that I just kind of went over very surface level, just let me know. Let me know in the comments what you would like me to talk about more in depth. I hope this video was helpful. If you liked it, please give it a like and consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.